Hello, and welcome to another episode of Be a Leader podcast, where we talk about current events in sports, military, and business through the lens of leadership. And we just talked about college football last week, and we'll probably talk about it next week. But today we're going to talk about the NBA, because there is something happening right within the NBA that's been getting a lot of hype, and that's the organizational changes that are happening in the NBA. It's been one of the strangest off seasons in NBA history. We're seeing championship team rosters being taken apart. And we're seeing generational young players taking less money and older players taking less money. And so none of this is really about basketball, but it's about what happens when you change the rules of the game. The NBA didn't go out and give a speech saying, we need to be more competitive, stop doing super teams. No, they changed the rule. And as I talk often, the structure, behaviors fit within that structure, okay? So if you don't like the behaviors, change the structure. And that's what the NBA has done. Okay, and now we're seeing the changes ripple down in real time. All right. So today we're going to talk about 4 leadership lessons that we can learn from in these structural changes that the NBA has done. And before we get into it, let me give you a little bit of context. If you don't care about these numbers, just skip forward. But for those that want some context, and for those that are visual, I also have my college basketball whiteboard here with some numbers that will help you out. So, okay, some key facts. The salary cap used to be $136 million, and it changed in July 1st of 2023. I remember this when it jumped from $136 million to $165 million, because those people that were free agents were making a ton of money because the rules changed. There was more money to get. That was a big deal, and everyone said, just wait, just give it a few more years. But these were the lucky people. But the salary cap is currently $165 million. If you don't pass that line, then you're good. But once you pass there's a luxury tax, okay, and the luxury tax is $200 million. And then we have first apron and second apron, not blue apron, that's still a publicly traded company, first apron and second apron. Once you pass these thresholds, the first apron is $209 million, the second apron is $221 million, that's a lot of money. Then certain restrictions start hitting. So then you start getting a little bit of trouble, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. So again, salary cap $165 million, luxury tax $200 million, first apron $209 million, second apron $221 million. And with that, let's talk about some of these consequences. Okay, there's my whiteboard. I put it back. Okay, so let's talk about some of these consequences. Really, we're going to focus about the second apron because that's the one getting all the attention. So what are some of the restrictions? If you pass the second apron, there's restrictions on aggregating salaries and trades, in taking back extra salary, in certain trade exceptions, in sending cash in trades, in certain free agent exceptions. And the one that's getting the most hype is a freeze in first round picks 7 years out. In other words, if you pass the second apron now, it will affect you 7 years from now as you're trying to get new talent in the NBA draft. Okay. James Dolan, the owner of the Knicks, called passing this line suicidal. And Commissioner Adam Silver noted, well, we wanted more competition, right? We were kind of like the NFL, very competitive league. 8 different NBA championships in the last 8 years. That's great. It's very competitive. Some might argue, well, this rule's only been around for 3 years. Yes, but it's working, right? Only one team passed the second apron last year, and that was the Cleveland Cavaliers. The rest of it stayed clear. Okay. So with that, let's go to the first lesson. And the first lesson is you cannot optimize for everything. And that might sound obvious, but we need to say it here because people are complaining about it. I remember John Beilein, when I was at Michigan, used to say this all the time when I was part of the basketball team. You can choose anything you want, but you can't choose everything. You got to make choices. Everything has a trade-off. In the old NBA, owners could avoid a lot of these hard trade-offs by just spending more money, right? Paying everyone, keeping every star. Okay, we'll worry about it later. We'll just have to pay the tax. But now the new NBA is different. The system forces you to declare what you actually value. It's like you got to make a decision now. Wait, decision making? Is that part of leadership now in the NBA? You got to make a choice. Okay. Victor Wembanyama, who I spoke about a lot recently in the NBA Finals. Great player. He's young. He's generational. He is the face of the future of the NBA. Fantastic player. Okay. He recently signed an extension, a five-year extension, worth $252 million. He left $50 million on the table because it could have gone up to $302 million. He left $50 million on the table. Why did he do that? This was his quote. He said, the reality of today's NBA is that often the potential of teams is not fulfilled because of money. I just want to make sure that's never our case. He wanted to make sure that money was not an obstacle for being competitive. And then he added whatever it takes. And later he also said, I just wanted to be an NBA Spur. I want to stay here. That was my most important thing, to be part of this team. Okay? He's declaring what is important to him. And I've talked previously about Jalen Brunson, because we talked a lot about him in the NBA Finals. He's a great proof of concept. He went there because he wanted to be a Knick. He had a chance to get an extension into 2024 and left $113 million on the table precisely to make sure the team had enough money to get all the other pieces that they needed, all the other talent. And they did in 2024 and 2025, 2026, all the way up to the trade deadline. They grabbed more pieces that they helped them win the NBA Finals. They got a coach that same year. They won the 2026 NBA Finals. It was just a few months ago. He's a proof of concept that he cared more about, he wanted to be a Knick and he wanted to win. And he made sure the team organization had the resources to do that. He's been a great leader. He's a great example of what leadership means. I want to be here. I want to be competitive. Let's build a team around it. Okay. Look, sacrifice doesn't prove that taking less away works. It proves that sacrifice can create options. Okay, and options can have value too. It's not all about the money. Options is valuable too. Okay, and the question is, what are you optimizing for? And if you don't know the answer to the question, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, this goes on to point number 2. Constraints expose leadership. Abundance hides it. I feel like, compared to the Marine Corps and the Army has a big budget. They have a lot of resources. The Marine Corps has very little budget, very few resources, and we often bring stuff in from the Army as hand-me-downs. And the Marine Corps builds this environment of leadership like we need it because we have less. It's part of our culture. It's part of the reason why I wanted to be a part of it. It's part of who I am today, right? It really exposes leadership because you have to make decisions, okay? Let's look at the Boston Celtics. They've probably been one of the most talked about teams in the offseason. They won the NBA Finals in 2024. Okay, they're NBA Finals champions. They have 2 great players, Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum. Okay, now Jalen Brown won the NBA Finals, rightly so. But here, a few weeks ago, July 1st, 2026, Boston had to trade Brown, again, an NBA Finals champion and MVP. They traded him in a deal that shocked the entire league. Why would you trade away one of the best players? Well, all you have to do is look at a quote from Brad Stevens. If you remember Brad Stevens, he was the coach of the Butler going to the NCAA Final Four, then went to the Celtics to be a coach, and now has moved up to be a president. So this was his quote. He said, the path looked a little bit more challenging with 70% of our cap and such a high percentage of our usage tied to 2 players. In other words, out of their whole roster, 70% of their money was going to 2 players. But there's more than 2 players on the court, 5 players on the court at one time, and you need a roster. You need more people. The point is, it was not that Brown wasn't good enough. He was everything you could want. It was the question, can we build an organization we want while allocating this much of our resources on 2 people? And the answer was no. We can't do it. It's unsustainable. Now let's flip it. Let's look at Adam Silver, the commissioner at the NBA. He made a quote saying the system's working as intended. He said, it's certainly not an unintended consequence. In other words, that was part of the deal why we made that structure for those behavioral changes. He said, when you have a salary system in place, as we do, every general manager is going to need to make a mixed basketball and business decision. That's the quote. You mean now leaders have to make decisions? They have to make hard decisions? What? We thought the NBA didn't have to do that. We thought rich people didn't have to do that, right? Look, money used to let rich franchises cover their mistakes. Okay? It used to do that in the NBA. It's still happening in college football. You hire a coach for a lot of money. Oh, don't like that coach? Let's just pay out his buyout, $50 million. Let's bring in another coach. Oh, we don't like him? Buyout, $60 million. Bring another coach. Oh, don't like him? We'll buy him out, $75 million. It's just the Wild West over there. Just spend money to cover your mistakes. But now we're seeing it's not the case anymore in the NBA. Okay? Abundance can hide bad leadership, but constraints exposes it. Now NBA teams have to make decisions and live with the consequences, live with the trade-offs. Leaders now need to make decisions. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. Be a leader. Make tough choices. Live with the consequences. Know what you're optimizing for. Have clarity. Execute. As part of a leader, okay, you're in that position, make the decision. Okay, let's move on to point number 3. Point number 3 is compensation is not the same thing as worth. Okay, I remember a conversation I was having with a school administrator about stipends for coaches and payment for teachers. And they were very clear. We do not pay teachers what they are worth. Not even close, not a chance. Because the impact and the value they're having on our young children, the next generation of leaders, they are worth so much more than we're able to pay them. Okay? That's a real economic burden because these teachers and these coaches are giving up a lot of compensation opportunities to live a lifestyle as teachers and coaches. Okay? It's not that they're giving up millions of dollars. No, they're giving up a big, it's a real economic burden, right? Because they want to make that impact. Okay? That is a disparity between worth and compensation. Okay? Not if I'm shortchanged 50 million or 10 million or any of that. Okay? Even me in the Marine Corps, I wanted the Marine Corps to have great. You are watching this video because of me and other people who have chosen to serve to protect our country so that you can watch this without worrying about other countries bombing you or going after you, killing you or your children, okay? Like, there's a lot of worth in that, but I didn't chase money going to the Marine Corps, okay? I knew it would never match compensation with worth because what is my value worth? What is my life worth? What is your life worth, okay? That's not the point. Look, three things can be true at the same time. They're very different. Human worth, value created, and market compensation. They're three different things. And when you think that they all have to be the same thing, you're going to get yourself into trouble. We're seeing that with NBA stars. Like, look, professional athletes, they want these big contracts, not because they need the more money. It's because they want to feel validation of what they are worth compared to their peers, okay? Whether the peers that are right next to them or the people they're trying to chase, it's a comparison game. And we that have matured enough realize that comparison will drive you mad. Okay? Comparison is a losing game because there'll always be someone that has more. Okay? Peace doesn't come from outdoing everyone else. Peace comes from living with your values and with the clarity of who you are, matching your behavior to identity, let the results speak for themselves. That's the IBR. But peace comes from being living in alignment with who you are, not comparison game. And we know all these players, they're very young, they haven't matured, but they're making a lot of money and they're chasing it. We understand it. But we cannot bring in together human worth, value created, and market compensation because it'll drive us mad. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that even if you pay a player that is worth, say they're worth 60 million, and you pay them all that, it's no guarantee they're actually going to provide that worth to the team or that all the resources they suck out from being paid so much doesn't hurt the team. Like, that happens, right? So it just, we like to think that it all has to be the same, and if it's not, it's unfair. Look, let me tell you right now, if you think you're underpaid right now, there's three options. There's probably three reasons why. Okay. A, sometimes the system doesn't fully reward the value you create. That's just how the system is. I gave my example in the Marine Corps. Okay? They weren't paying me what my life was worth, but that was part of the system I joined, okay? Sometimes the system doesn't fully reward it. B, sometimes you've consciously accepted other benefits instead. It could be security, it could be stability, it could be a mission, it could be geography. Maybe you're in a corporate job and you know you can make more money if you try to be an entrepreneur and build something, because then there's theoretically no ceiling of what you can make. But you value the security of knowing where your next paycheck comes. You value your benefits, your health insurance, your 401k. Maybe you value that more, okay? And it's a trade-off because when you're an entrepreneur, I'll tell you, I've done it many times. I've built startups, I've done different things. I run my own business now. Then you're worried about, am I going to make money for my mortgage or my bills or my kid's future, right? So you're consciously accepting other benefits instead. That's B. And C, and sometimes if you're honest with yourself, you realize you haven't done what's required of you to capture more of your own value. Because you're seeing yourself at what you could be at your peak, at your future, but with your current skills and experience, you're not there yet, and more work needs to be done. You need to do more work on yourself. So those are three things that I wanted to point out. Okay. Look, you cannot control whether the world pays you what you believe you are worth. But there are things you can control. You can control what you develop for yourself, if you're developing yourself, what risks you take, okay? How you negotiate, which trade-offs you're willing to accept. We all have trade-offs. Okay? Those are things that you can control. Control the controllables. And while I'm on this point, okay, this is exactly the type of work I help people in my Confident Leader Bootcamp. because most people know they're capable of more, but the hard part is actually building the clarity and the confidence to close that gap instead of just feeling frustrated by it. Frustration, oh, that's so tough. Stop living in frustration. Do something about it, okay? I have my last cohort for 2026 starting here in mid-September. And if you've been sitting on this feeling that you're worth a lot more that you're currently capturing, could be in your role, your business, your career, and you're ready to actually do something about it, I invite you to join our next cohort. Stop just thinking about it and do something about it, okay? You can look more information on the notes of this episode, or you go to my website, danielpinedo.com. And with that, let's go back to the NBA. And that leads us to lesson number 4, point number 4. Every choice has a cost, and clarity is what makes the sacrifice worth it. So let's talk about LeBron James. LeBron James, everyone knows that name. He's 41 years old, still playing in the NBA. He's played 23 years already in the NBA. He's already generated $581 million in his NBA salary alone. Last year, he was the 11th most highest payer played in the league when he was with the Los Angeles Lakers. And then this coming season, he shocked everyone by leaving Los Angeles and going to Philadelphia on a 2-year, $8 million deal, which is the veteran minimum. He can't be paid any less according to the NBA. He got the minimum. And the quote he said is, "I'm not going for the money." And what's interesting about LeBron James, because I'm not a LeBron James fan, I'll be straight with you. I grew up in the era of Michael Jordan. He was a dog. He was mentally unstoppable. And then watching LeBron James have to be carried off the NBA Finals court because of heat cramps with the Miami Heat. It's a different generation, a different type of player entirely. I have a lot of respect for what he's done. He's an amazing player, but he's not my favorite, okay? But I have to tell you right now, I have to give him a lot of respect for this, okay? He said winning matters most. And then his actions matched it, okay? That's alignment. That's integrity, and I applaud him for that, okay? Let's look at another perspective. And this is of David Kelly. He is the Players Union Executive Director. He argued that players should not have to, quote, carry the burden of keeping a team competitive, right? We were talking about the economic burden earlier. He thinks that players shouldn't carry the economic burden, okay? It's a fair perspective because that's his perspective. It's worth hearing even if it doesn't make any sense, okay? I completely disagree with David Kelly, okay? It's not their burden about the team. They have their own burden. They have the burden of choosing what matters most to them. Wemby chose what matters most to him. LeBron James chose what matters most to them. Let everyone choose too what matters most to them, okay? It's great. Have a choice, okay? Look, if you want, you can take the max contract. If you want, you can chase a championship. If you want, you can keep all your stars. If you want, you can preserve the flexibility of a roster, right? But stop pretending that every option can coexist, because it cannot, okay? Leadership isn't finding the decision without a cost. Leadership is deciding which cost you are willing to pay, okay? That's leadership. Be a leader. Have a backbone. Have some clarity. Decide what's important to you and then go do it and stop complaining, okay? It's a privilege to be in a leadership position. Anyways, you guys know I'm big on leadership. That's what we're talking about, right? Be a Leader podcast. So that takes us to the main takeaways of this episode. Let me grab my college whiteboard again, and let's talk about the 4 main takeaways of this episode of Be a Leader podcast. So the first one, you cannot optimize for everything. All right, we're just talking about that. Wemby and Brunson both left real money on the table, and they both proved the sacrifice can buy you something money can't, and that's options. They want to make sure they have options. They want to win championships, okay? You cannot optimize for everything. So make a choice. They make clear decisions, and they're going to get rewarded for that, okay? We saw that already, Brunson winning with the Knicks. Number 2, constraints expose leadership. Abundance hides it, okay? Boston didn't trade a finals MVP because he wasn't good. He's excellent. Brown is an excellent player. They traded him because leadership means asking what your resources actually allowed you to build what you want to build, okay? So it exposes leadership. They had to make a leadership decision. Third one, compensation is not the same thing as worth. I said that multiple times, okay? Teachers, coaches, employees, plenty of people create more value than they financially capture, okay? The question is not, is it fair? Okay? The question is, if you don't like it, what are you doing about it to close that gap? And that's where I invited you to my Confident Leader Bootcamp. And point number 4, every choice has a cost. Clarity is what makes the sacrifice worth it. Okay? LeBron James didn't just say winning mattered. He backed it up with getting the minimum contract he could make to prove it. Okay? So, let me put this back. And I leave you with one question for this week. Okay? Here's a question I want you to sit with this week. Okay? What are you optimizing for? Is it money? Is it security? Is it mission? Is it flexibility? Is it loyalty? Is it something else? What are you optimizing for? Because you can't maximize them all at once. Okay? No one can. And that's not a flawed system. That's a system working. It's all about choosing what's important to you. Okay? Leadership begins when you get clear about what you're actually optimizing for. Okay? And then becoming willing to pay that price for it and executing. Okay? That's what leadership is. That's what it means to be a leader. Anyways, as we wrap up this episode of Be a Leader podcast, I hope you enjoyed it. Please share it with someone that would benefit. Please like it. Please give it a 5-star. Please comment. It helps the algorithm. Plus, I want to hear your thoughts. What's your biggest takeaway? Okay, what are your thoughts about the NBA salary rule changes? What's your thoughts about the NBA? What's your predictions? Tell me about it. I love to hear from you. And remember, whether you're leading yourself, leading others, or leading leaders, be a leader. My name is Daniel Pinedo. Thank you. And until next time.